Well. Welcome back to Krown's Crypto Cave. And once again, Krown has faded the jewel, has disagreed with the jewel, and Krown pays in spades. Of course, it's been the trend for the last 2 years. For anyone who's new here, we have this indicator called the jewel. And anytime that I disagree with it, I am wrong. It is right. Yesterday, we had sell signals on the 1 through 12 hour, all pointed down. And what do you know? Nice $1,000 dump almost from about the high 11,000s to the low 11,000s all in the last 24 hours. But where does that lead us up for today, as the short and medium term timeframes do shift around? Long term timeframes actually still unchanged, still looking at the range at 12,000 versus 11,000 to the downside respectively. But more importantly, how does this little dump or respectively big dump perhaps play into the greater part of this formation in the long term structure here? Well, we're going to be talking about that, of course, and then more importantly, looking at the actual metrics on the Krown trading application, which can be found at app.krowntrading.net. What do we see here? We do see that the Bitcoin dominance is popping up just a small smidgen there, as Bitcoin does play out a rather aggressive move. Global interest actually coming up a couple hundred million as well, I believe, as yesterday was in the 2.2.5 billion-ish read. And we do see that fear and greed index has actually had a healthy downturn as well, coming in from an 84 read to a 75. So more importantly, it is a little bit concerning here that we do see open interest going up while price action does come down, as that would suggest that people are using this as an opportunity to put on short positions, which would by what's the word that I'm looking for? In turn, imply, that's the word that I'm looking for, that this move was not longs closing. In fact, it was actually shorts opening, which is a little bit more indicative of we'll get into that in just a second. But looking at the fear and greed index, I do want to document this right here, just because we did actually head up to the highest level that we've seen since almost a year now, really. Since definitely we've been mining this data since May, but I believe we saw around this area at the beginning of the year, something like that. And taking a stark downturn from that region, which was indicative of a little bit of frothiness. And also Bitcoin funny rate, not really doing all that much here, still kind of inconsequential. I don't think that there's too much to be made off of something like this when it is well below 0.1%. People are really not paying all that much to hold their positions per day. But overall, Bitcoin playing out the ranges nonetheless. And I'm curious how this is going to switch around. Oh, that's right. We still need to recolorize this. Okay, so to be determined as it does get worked on. But anyways, let's get into the actual price action charts themselves and follow up from yesterday's analysis, because regardless of my opinion on this, which I always do like to say, I do not trade my opinion, I trade technical analysis. And I don't think if I traded my opinion, I don't think I would be profitable. Maybe slightly profitable, but probably not profitable enough to like live. I would think. So technical analysis at the end of the day, what did we say yesterday? If Bitcoin does break below 11,500, we'd be looking for a move back down to 11,000. We did get that move, just not coming, in the way that my bias was looking for yesterday. And more importantly, the jewel giving sell signals all throughout the 1 through 12 hour, playing out right here as we can see that next downturn. So we also said yesterday that if the jewel on the 12 hour does get the next downtick on both the blue and purple getting negative slows, plus actually the yellow in this case as well, all suggesting a nice play there. And that happened right here, right at the 11th, just above 11,700. So still getting a pretty nice move there. And more importantly, now Bitcoin coming down all the way to the bottom side of the range. How does this change things? Well, it only changes things on the short and medium term time frames, of which both of those triggers were already met. And I'm actually going to get rid of this trend line right here. It technically still does work, I suppose, but I'd rather just work with horizontals right now, as things are rather well defined, and more importantly, it's just more accurate and in the way that I've found to trade off of in these situations. So looking at this right here, Bitcoin is going to try to set in a higher low overall. The question is, can it do it, and how would we know, and how would it confirm itself? Well, if Bitcoin can start to close 4-hour dildos back above 11,500, it will, and it will initiate hidden bullish divergence along the same task. But does that imply that Bitcoin is just going to blast off through the upside after that? No, actually, because we do have a nice range here on the medium term time frame, and if Bitcoin does close a 4-hour dildo above the 11,500-ish region right here, which it looks like it is genuinely trying to, plenty of wicks in this region being accumulated. If that were to happen, then we will initiate hidden bullish divergence on the 4-hour time frame, on the 6-hour time frame, on the 8-hour time frame, on the 10-hour time frame, on the 12-hour time frame, are we going to do it on the daily as well? Hold on, where's that last point coming towards? Right here. Yes, it will. In fact, let me just double check. Yeah, it would. It's like right there. So that would actually be equally as interesting, but really only imply a move back up to about 11,750 to 11,800. It does not imply a breakout of the top side of the range. The long-term range, and I need to be very deliberately clear in stating this, is still the same as we've been saying for a while now. 12,000 on a higher term time frame close, above this blue box right here, good. Or even 11,900 on a 12-hour or daily is good enough for transacting another move up into the mid 12,000s. And I still would stick true with that. By the same token, a move below 11,000 liquid zone right here, and I'm looking for an overall move back down below 10,000, actually, with bounces along the way at 10.5, and yeah, mostly 10.5 is where I have my eyes on, but overall, I would be looking for things to come back down to below 10,000. And more importantly, where are we right now? Well, we're quite literally right smack dab in the middle of that range. So it's really premature to really be calling anything else on top of that. But I do think that it is interesting that we see all these things start to formulate themselves, albeit unconfirmed. However, the confirmation level is still pretty much the same areas as what we saw yesterday for confirming the medium-term move to the downside below this blue box right here, which actually confirmed right here. We closed just barely below 11,500, kind of like midday, it looks like, at least for me in the Eastern European time zone. And then another $500, $600 moves to the downside as it does get another test back up here, and then boom, all the way down to 11.1. So yeah, overall, doesn't really change. I mean, doesn't really change too much there for the long term, but the short term and medium term, yes, absolutely. And now but it does shift the perception, and more importantly, it can have a chain. It can have a chain reaction here too. By the way, I haven't drank any coffee today, so if you're wondering why I'm struggling with my words, that would be why. But I'm gonna try a little bit of no coffee for some time, as I think that I have some sort of like sneaky addiction, which I don't know, man. It feels like every day if I wake up and I don't drink coffee, like it's not right. Well, that's probably meaning that something's wrong. Anyways, before I talk about more of my personal issues, let me go into the daily Stokes, of which they're coming down at the same time. It's not necessarily the best thing of all time, especially when Bitcoin is technically below the medium-term time frame range. So it does gear the probabilities. I'm gonna imagine in the favor of the downside. We'll obviously look at probabilities soon enough. We do have this trend line forming. This sort of regression coming in all the way back from, when was this? May of this year. Now this regression would be drawn a little bit more like this, I suppose. So it would show support somewhere around the edge of the bearish control zone, but that would imply that Bitcoin's going to get another swing to the downside, or another couple swings to the downside. The question is, does it actually break this level? If it does, then yes, it has problems, as will not only will we be destroying these long-term levels, but just in the most basic way of analyzing the chart, we'd actually have a downtrend, as that would be taking out your last higher low right here, and then Bitcoin would actually have technically a reversal on the 12-hour and I believe daily as well. Yes, it would. Anywhere below 11,000 is problematic for the daily structure. Now the weekly is a little bit different, and I do think that it is great to have perspective on the higher term timeframes, of which that is what's making me be a lot more muted in my response right here, as mostly the higher term timeframes still kind of fine here as they are. Now that doesn't mean that they can't switch around, but I do think that it would take at least another week or two before they would officially do that. As it is right now, the weekly just had a backfill on last week's open and bouncing off of it pretty nicely thus far, bouncing up another $200, $300, which is decent enough. And then more importantly, it's how we kind of set in this next weekly at the closure on Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern time, which we'll see obviously CME's close on Friday. So CME's relative level as well, and let's just make sure that they have the same sort of thing going on here. They do, but if CME's close this next weekly anywhere below 11.3, big problems. If spot closes this weekly anywhere below 11,000, big problems. But we already know that area from the daily levels, and even the lower term time frames as well, all kind of agreeing with 11,000 of significant importance here. I need to take a sip of this water, man. I'm fucking thirsty right now. Jesus Christ. Listening to the sweet sucks of my water bottle's tip right there. Didn't you miss that from the old live streams now, didn't you? No, I've actually been doing live streams on my other channel recently, which has been pretty damn fun. Anyways, okay, cool. So let's actually go. I actually do want to look at probabilities very early today, just because I do think that this stuff is more interesting right now. especially when the ranges are really well defined. But we'll use 11,500 to kind of drive a move back up here, because if Bitcoin does close above 11,500, we will confirm local lows within this region, and that would again imply moves at the very least back up to about 10,750, probably more like 10,850. So I'd say about $100 range at the top side of this area right here. I don't think it would imply a full-on move all the way up here, however. So I'd rather take a more what's it called, conservative approach with that one. By the same token, as long as they're below 11.5, I mean, it is pressure down to be fair, but I would say that things are getting a little bit, are suggesting a little bit more of a bouncy bounce territory regardless. So with that in mind, we'll look at the long-term probability to the downside below 11,000. We'll look at the long-term probability to the upside above 12,000. And then we'll look at this area right here, 11.5 on a lower term time frame, and kind of judge that one up. Keep in mind though, that this is continuous and really only applies to the next closure. So it is, it is a limited, what's the word that I'm looking for? Once again, it's limited relevancy here, just because, well, after the, what gets done in this next 4 hours of time, for example, it's not, it doesn't really have, we're not gonna be able to get that for the next period after that. I mean, we could forecast it, but I find that it's not as dependable in these sorts of situations, especially on the lower term time frame. So with that in mind, we'll look at, we'll actually look at 11.5 for the lower, for the upper target range here versus 11,000 to the downside. We could also, well, is there a continuation point that we could grab as well that would work a little bit more aggressively? You could, nah, I don't think so. I was gonna say using yesterday's wick low, but no, I don't think that would work in this situation. It's too fraught with peril within this region. It's too many things accumulating in there. So what we'll do is we'll just keep it on, we'll keep it on 11,000 even versus 11,500. Now, obviously the above target probability should have a much more high probability, seen as Bitcoin's a lot closer to it. $150 versus $350, for example, and it does. For 40.5% probability to close above it on the on the upside, which would then initiate that next move, another probably 300-ish, we'll call it, up to about 11.8, give or take about $50 there, and in the downside probability showing about 21.25% as well in comparison. Now it is a little bit, and the Krown trading Stokes also giving a sell signal on the daily as well. That's actually pretty fucking concerning, to be honest with you. So am I gonna go against my indicator again? It's like, Jesus, don't learn your lesson and then repeat the same issue. Well, I think maybe that's a good time to maybe talk about also, the idea of not trading your opinion and trading technical analysis. My opinion is wrong all the time, as I said, and when it comes down to technical analysis, levels are levels. And as we looked at yesterday, once 11,500 broke, that was the ringing bell to take all long exposure off, and maybe even think about some short exposure, of which I did not put on any short exposure, but I did close long positions. And well, those were positions started from the low 9,000, so don't really, I mean, it's not, it's really at the end of the day closing a long-term position, based off that, which would imply that can still manage it going forwards. However, I actually did not do it with options. I did it with spot, and I want to kind of be neutral right here as Bitcoin, figures out its range, and probably puts in some more time going sideways here. I'd imagine, just, even if you are bullish or bearish, probably does trade a little bit sideways, as it does put in another, or try to put in another bounce here. The question is, does this bounce just put in an anemic lower high, or do we actually charge through that 12,000-ish region? But looking at the probabilities here, it would favor the upside target probability. So it would say that playing out that hidden bullish divergence or confirming it is rather likely today. But I'm curious what it would show like on a very low time frame, like a 4 hour here. And the 4 hour is showing what? Is showing 11.69% probability for the upside. And this is only relevant for the next 4 hour close, by the way, which is coming in 3 hours and 45 minutes. The below target probability actually is 0%, which is kind of interesting too. But more interesting, it would suggest that probably sideways within that range between this next closure. And again, it is a little bit of a ticking time bomb. If Bitcoin does fail to get back above 11,500, relatively soon, I'd say by end of week, especially, meaning Friday for CMEs, then yes, things will be problematic. But for right now, I'd much rather just take a more conservative approach looking at this one. And it does look like most momentum oscillators are coming down rather pretty aggressively. Looking at 4-hour Stokes coming all the way down to the bearish control zone, which is not necessarily the best thing of all time, but we do have a nice support trend line forming on the 4-hour Stokes right here. So that has been working for the last couple lows here within this formation since June 25th and 10th of July. That's matching up with these bases right here. Hold on, where's my 10th of July? Actually, all the way down here on this base being built. And then the prior one on top of that was this guy right here, this low right here. So this low right here, this low right here out of that base. I'm not necessarily certain that those have any real implications with the current price action, though. Let's see if there's something similar on the other low-term time frames. We do see that the 3 hours coming down very aggressively as well. Oh, it's kitchen time, baby! Fucking kitchen time. Get your forks out, baby. And 2 hours showing about the same thing as well. But all of them do have some space, and alongside the hourly, which has actually had a little bit of a bearish reset there too. So I'm curious what the reverse Stochastic indicator cross would be showing for all of these, and then we can probably come up with some very, very, very low-term time frame areas to kind of judge this next bouncy bounce. So looking at the hourly, momentum will remain to the upside as long as we're above 11,275 about. Looking at the 2 hours, showing about 11,350, which is actually riding the 200 simple and 200 exponential average, which, to be fair, Bitcoin, regardless of whether it's bullish or bearish, anytime that it does get too away from these moving averages on this time frame, for whatever it's worth, typically does at the very least balance it or sell off on it on a similar move to the downside. In this case, we could look at this area right here where Bitcoin does spend a little bit of time away from it. The first test down is a buy, yes. But that doesn't mean that we're going to get a continuation on the higher term time frames. This is only relevant for the 2 hour. Again, same thing over here to the downside. First one's a major sell. First one's a major sell. You get what I'm saying with that. Anyways, more importantly, with what we're looking at right now, these areas are seeming to line up with each other pretty well. 3 hours going to also be showing, what is it going to be showing? 11,500. Actually does turn the momentum back up to the upside. So I do feel I feel a lot more confident with that. Looking at 11,500 as a nice pivot for these time frames. The 4 hour showing about 11,630, which I imagine probably comes down on the next, on the next couple ticks regardless anyways. So likely more sideways with another attempt back above 11,500. The key question is, can Bitcoin close above 11,500? Even on a 2 hour or 4 hour, probably does it for initiating that hidden bullish divergence, which then is built up all the way technically to a daily, but even more aggressively, like the most aggressively, a 12 hour actually, which, again, a signal like this on the Joule is typically pretty damn powerful. So that does make me think that, the bounce here very easily could be sold into, but I'm still going to be using the long-term ranges to be judging an actual breakout or breakdown, and that's gonna matter most to me at the end of the day. But it is suggesting that there is cause for concern, like legitimate cause for concern here. I do want to check out world markets as well, as we are already about 20 minutes into this bitch. And what do we see? Where's my NAS? Yeah, NAS coming down very aggressively as well. Did take out the area that we spoke about yesterday to the downside, which we said would not. I almost said ignite. Jesus Christ, man! What kind of words does my coffeeless brain think of today? But would transpire and move down to the 21 exponential average. However, again, same thing here. It is technically a higher low, or it's going to try to put in a higher low as it is. Is there the same sort of potential hidden bullish divergence here? Actually, no. So that is another big problematic thing, and we do see daily Joule kind of lining up for a sell posture as well, and momentum will remain to the downside basically as long as we're below all-time highs. So we did say that there is rotations going on in traditional markets right now, with techs coming down and E-mini SPY futures going up to their prior high and very likely to sell off from that. I believe that we did see that. So we got up to almost 30. Oh my God, yeah, we got up to about 3,400. Exactly right where we said yesterday. Sorry, I'm starting to sound like people I don't want to sound like. Jesus Christ, man. But looking at this area right here, did reapproach the prior high. Gonna sell off on that. Very, 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 very common stuff. Coming down to the next relevant level at 3,300-ish region. Don't really have too much to add on to it right now. There is not regular bearish divergence present, there is regular bearish divergence present from all the way over here to where we are right now. I do think that this move to the downside could very easily extend all the way to 3,275. area as all momentum oscillators do turn back down to the downside as well. And daily RSI is kind of flirting with a kick out of the bullish control zone at the same time. So this does matter for all markets, as we do typically see all things move in unison, kind of in concert. And of course, with that, with those things in place, it does again cause concern for Bitcoin as well. Looking at Tesla, again, Tesla was the big harbinger of death and despair, as we've been saying for a while. Feel quite nice about that, calling a top somewhere in this region right here. And so actually officially getting the breakdown yesterday on closure. Now, this one is announcing a 4-to-1 stock split, I believe. So it probably will rally today. And that's just... That's just trading bullshit sometimes. But yes, it very likely will happen based off that news, and it is a legitimate fundamental change. But overall, I do think that things are set in motion here, and we do have a confirmation of a new trend beginning to the downside. We're getting our last few lower highs right here, low right here, lower low right here, and now we are in the process of continuing that low, breaking the descending triangle to the downside, which probably does have a measure move somewhere right around here to 1250-ish region, also filling the gap from early July as well. So I've been saying for a while now that Tesla's probably going to lead this market to the downside, and I do believe that that's what we're seeing right now. Does that mean that we're going to see the whole market like reverse on the macro right here, right now? That's a different topic. But for the short term and medium term, yes, absolutely. And it could be that Tesla does come down to 1200 or 1100 and maybe reverses back up there to the upside. Potentially, yes. But I do feel I do feel quite confident that Tesla, depending upon how this stock split goes, very likely does end up coming down again and fulfilling that. So we'll go on over here and check out Eurodollar as well. I do believe that we called a major top there. Yes, indeed, it is topping out a little bit. But I would still give it time. I don't think that this one like fully reverses like right now. I think that would be very unlikely. I do think that there's downside pressure, but it's probably going to put it on a monthly for perspective. And realistically, it's going to take it's very likely to take some time here grinding this area out between 117 and 119 region, which couldn't come sooner for me because my dollar is getting measured in euros is not nice when the euro dollar decides to go up. Jesus Christ, way too much. What is this over the last month? About 6%, which is stuff that you can actually use. So a little bit more problematic there for my personal life as an American living in Europe. But anyways, yes, is starting to really show signs that it is getting exhausted here, and I do think that it will grind out this area a little bit more. But overall, as long as it's below 119.5, I do believe that this run is probably long-term over. It's just, probably going to take a few months. And then I'll be looking for moves back down to 115 range and perhaps below over time. Let's also look at some of the other market leaders, maybe Microsoft, of which, yeah, coming all the way back down and playing out this range as well. Kind of similar to Bitcoin in that regard. Coming all the way down to the low side of the range. I do think that this one stabs a little bit lower officially to the 55. Probably does try to mount a bounce there as well. But the clear and obvious area to be aware of is this last low right here. If it does close below, let's call it 201. Actually 201 even about. I would be looking for an overall move over the next couple of weeks, bringing it back down to down just below 190 actually. Okay, what else we want to check out? Maybe some shit coins as well. What's Mr. Buterol doing in the early morning hours? 375. Similar here too, is breaking the ascending triangle structure. We do not have higher lows any longer. It looks like no, we do not. Or no, sorry, we technically do. However, it's not looking pretty. I mean, this is not how you see your higher lows get set in by like just a fucking hair. That's not strength. This one is looking toppy here, and it is looking like it does want to come down a little bit more. Probably somewhere down around the 21 exponential moving average at 355. I do believe yesterday we said if it broke the medium-term range, similar to Bitcoin, below about 385, we'd be looking for a move down to this trend line right here at 370. I think that we got that, or sorry, 370-ish region. We got that, but I'd still be using this area kind of to judge an actual confirmation of a change of trend. Technically, it has not changed just yet, but as you can see, any sort of a closure below 375, and it will confirm officially on a 4-hour at the very least, and more importantly on a 12-hour as well on the next closure, which I think that we already actually did confirm. This one closing 378 spot 69. This one closing 379.5. So yeah, technically just by a hair. I'd like to see continuation sooner rather than later if this is going to play out. But next levels that I'll be watching at the downside is 360 right here. 360, and then below that I'd be looking at this area right here, maybe slightly lower than that, at like 340 to 345 ish region. But I do believe that if Mr. Buterin does officially close below this area, 372.5 on the next 12 hour, we will very likely see this area down here at about 345, 343 region, with a bounce somewhere around 360-ish region on the short-term time frames in unison. Okay, what else we want to check out? Let's check out Link. What is Link doing during all this nonsense? Still looks good versus Satoshi. I mean, this is still bullish for Satoshi. It's fucking crazy. But it is, and I don't really have any reason to not believe it's going to give another try towards, what is this? 120,000 Satoshis, about somewhere in this region right here, or very close to it. Still in an uptrend, still looking good, and I'd be using this point as kind of a management for a downside trade. 108,800. 108,800. There you go. There's your numbers. Have your spoons, my friends. But yeah, below that level, I'd be looking for a return back down to the last prior high right here, somewhere around, what is this, 94,000 Satoshis, it looks like. But for right now, very, very likely to give another try towards the upside, regardless. And still, I mean, this looks fine, fine on these time frames as it is. Doesn't mean that it can't change, but the levels are set for a change of behavior there. Let's go check in on Cardano as well. We said down on this one, back down to 1100. I think that we're in progress towards that area. I'd be looking for a bounce so along the 10 simple, of which we're pretty much there right now. A few more Satoshis, maybe officially down to 1100 even, and then I'd be looking for a bounce. But overall, long term, this one is problematic as well, as this is, yet again, another lower high confirmed last week, and now getting continuation this week. I mean, is would imply that long term, or maybe not long term, but medium term, this one probably does come back down below 1,000 Satoshis, down to 950, and kind of play out the long term trend of having lower highs and lower lows, baby. Looking at momentum oscillators, weekly Stokes turning down. And this is coming along the side of a head and shoulders on the RSI, plus major, massive, humongous hidden bearish divergence at the same time between this price point and this price point, correlating with this high right here and this high more recently right here. So, very likely to come back down below 1,000 Satoshis overall, and then we'll judge if it actually returns all the way back down to the prior lows after that. But for right now, pressure on most alts versus Satoshis does look down, except for Link, because Link just does what Link does. And let's go check out Mr. Buterin versus Bitcoin. Well, actually, this one doesn't look as obvious as Cardano. Short term, yes, I'd be looking for a down, maybe back down to 319 or 3,200,000. Is that? Yeah, I think it is. Probably bounce there and then use that as a management point for trades lower. If it does break lower, I'd be looking for a retest of this high right here. If not, then I'd really want to see the weekly close. But a consolidation sideways above 315 is actually good, actually healthy, and that would imply another move up towards not 4, actually 4 million, in fact. So what does that look like for spot charts then? Maybe on some like Litecoin. I'm curious what Litecoin's doing in this region. Litecoin quite literally confirming a top. Does look like it wants to come back down to 48 and a quarter, 48 and a half, it looks like. So problematic there as well. So we do see a little bit of a bifurcated market. Some things looking like they're trying to set in higher lows. Some things are continuation of trends. This one obviously putting in a high right here is continuation of the long-term downtrend. So we are seeing some cryptos are kind of getting weaker and weaker with each and every down. Some cryptos are gaining strength respectively with each and every down, and then gaining more strength on all of the ups. That would be an example of Link and maybe even Tesla's as well, of which we can probably check out too. Haven't looked at this one in a bit, and we should actually look at Link versus dollar as well. But looking at Tesla's right here, the breakout does look, well, the selling looks real. The selling looks real more than anything. It very likely does bounce off this region, maybe bounces all the way back up towards, a little bit north of $4, but I don't think that this is strength right here coming down this aggressively. Do we have bullish divergence at all? No, not really. Maybe on a 4 hour perhaps. No, not really. I do think that it bounces here, but overall, any sort of a break below, let's call it 369, I'm looking for returns back down to 340 and maybe beyond. So I'd keep a critical eye on that. Looking at the weekly, it's too early to judge a weekly, but if the weekly closes like this, I mean, it's hard not to look at that as major selling. Okay, cool. What about Ripple? How's Ripple doing all this nonsense as well? Looks like Litecoin's chart. I mean, you could just put these charts right next together and really not anything different. And what do you know? Ripple once again, my Ripple crew, Look at what has happened. Look at this dastardly deed. No, it's just manipulation by the whales because they want to accumulate your Ripple's low. But by making lower lows and lower highs over the last 3 years, it's exactly as it sounds. Don't ask questions. We do see not only a lower high being confirmed, but also a phenomenally massive hidden bearish divergence at the same time between this point and this point, correlating with this high right here in February and this high right here that we just put in, probably implying a move at the very least back down to 20, just below a quarter, and then maybe a little bit lower than that extension at 22 cents, depending upon what the reaction is of this region, although I would be looking for a bounce on the first pass. It is kind of interesting though, because all the other momentum oscillators are pointed up. Even the weekly jewel gave a long signal right here, which was where exactly? It was on this price point. So that was 20 cent up to 30 cent about. So that's actually okay. I think that is relevant to say that might have played out at 63.25%. Still pretty damn nice to the upside, but yes, putting in lower highs is certainly not nice at the same time. And looking at weekly Stokes, actually pointing north as well, so maybe it does get a chance here. But overall, I do think that it has a little bit of down in line with the rest of the market versus Satoshi's. Just for these, versus dollar right here. But I would be looking for a bounce at about a quarter at the very least on low time frames nonetheless. Looking at Monero, interesting. A Monero backfill, I mean, it doesn't necessarily look that bad or that problematic. I'd probably give it another chance. Did close on new highs as well, so I happen to favor the trend over momentum oscillators in this case. Let's go check out BNB. What's this one doing? Kind of got a lower high in the making right here too, but still in backfill territory. I don't think that there's anything to make off of this right now. What about gold? Holy shit, fuck. I do believe we said down yesterday on gold, but I did not think this much down. And this is also extremely concerning for Bitcoin as well, seeing as these two do seem to trade somewhat in unison as well. Looking at gold coming all the way, oh my God. Okay, so yesterday I believe that we said gold was very likely to come back down to about 1980-ish region and probably bounce. No, that's not happening at all, or at least if it did happen, it happened on like a very low time frame. And it looks like it actually did try to do that on a low time frame, but not to the extent that I was looking for. And more importantly, looking at the weekly right here, it is very likely to bounce off the 10 simple at kind of where we are right now. I do think that it does bounce, yes, regardless of the fact of whether you're bullish or bearish, but long term, is the party over for a little bit of time? Yeah, I do think so. I think that we're entering into our first major pullback and first major consolidation phase on this run, of which has just been pretty much straight up since May, June. So it is, it is kind of natural to have those sorts of areas also retest the prior high as well on a weekly closing basis from September in 2011. By the way. But again, we can now use these areas to kind of manage off of. And while I do think that there's a bounce there and probably does bring it back up north of 1900, we'll have to kind of watch this one over time now to judge it. I'm curious how this does change around the monthly as well, just as it stands. The monthly is the monthly still is continuation at the end of the day. Still going to take some time. If it even does top out here, it would take at least a few months before it actually comes back down below 1800 or 1750, we'll call it. You do want to give a little bit of space there, but more importantly, it is in the cards. However, bouncy bounce here is very, 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 very likely. I do think 1950-ish region is where I'll be looking towards, and then we get to play the game of, is this a lower high or not, which is the same game that Bitcoin's going to be entered into, whether it likes it or not right now as well. And this is, this can really go either way here. When you look at wicks like this below, like right below support, some people interpret that as bullish. Some people interpret it as bearish. I happen to be neutral on the fact. I would rather just look at levels here. And again, if I'm going to start to wrap up this talk, which is already 32 minutes long, and that's actually, I feel like I'm missing a few other things. Hold on, let's double check. Okay, is there anything here? Do I have to reference the MACD today? What about the Trollinger bands? Trollinger is bouncing off the median Trollinger band right here, which is expected. Is that going to be enough to get it back above 11,500? I happen to think so, yes. And I do think that Bitcoin will head back up and test around, 10.7, 10.8 this week. But that does not mean that I'm looking for this to blast out to the upside. The key ingredient for confirming a move to the upside, at least in my mind, is still going to be at least a 4-hour close above 11.9, preferably a daily or 12-hour close above 11.9. Those would likely do it. But for right now, playing out the short and medium term timeframes is kind of hairy game here, because things will move fast once we do break either below 11,000 or above 12,000. So I do want to be more or less flat and neutral for that next move, because that's probably going to be the next big opportunity in this crazy crypto land. But looking at the daily Bollinger Bands, it is a little bit enlightening that things are still in more or less a bullish posturing here. Looking at daily MACD's nuts, definitely bearish. Not only as Bitcoin breaks the medium-term time frame range, but also crosses the MACD to the downside at the same time. So momentum is turning while Bitcoin does break the 11.5 region on a daily closure as well, nonetheless. But again, I do think that things bounce here. It's just there are cracks starting to be shown. However, it's hard to hit like a higher high and a higher low. So if it can put in a higher low right here, the bias is going to be on another move back up towards 11,750, we'll call it. And that's going to give it another chance to break above 12,000. But I want to be very direct in saying this. This is why I repeat it ad fucking nauseum, is that until Bitcoin actually fully and formally breaks above or below the range, as we've been stating for the last week or so, there's no call to be made from my side. Other than that, I think it's maybe time. Maybe we can check out some of the lower time frames here too. Yeah, 4 hours showing a lot of wicks below the bottom side Bollinger Band. Typically, that is a sign that it will bounce as well. Do we have any sort of divergence here on the MACDs? I would imagine probably not, because we don't see it on RSI, and I don't really find that MACD histogram divergence is more or less dependable, or sorry, is more dependable than RSI. I find it actually much less dependable, in fact. But overall, kind of lining up with the Bollinger Bands as well, would suggest that Bitcoin probably does find its footing here at about 11.3 and gives another try back up to 11.5, of which that has implications with the medium-term timeframes once again, as we've been saying. So with that said, I think it's time to wrap this bitch up. Basically the same things that we've been looking at, just flipped around here. 11.5 to the upside does very likely initiate hidden bullish divergence all the way up to, at the very least, a 12-hour. Present on all time frames, which should be able to get price action back up to about 11.8 region. That's where I do think that it's time to be a little bit conservative once again. If Bitcoin does top out there, that's going to be a lower high, and that's going to be problematic, and that'll be the first major signals of reversal of trend on the higher term timeframes here. If that does happen, by the same token, I'd still be using 12,000 as a governor, or even 11.5, or sorry, not 11.5, 11.9 to be very, very clear. 11.9 on a 12-hour or daily closure for transpiring another move to about 12,500. By the same token, 11,000 backstop to the downside. If Bitcoin does break this area, I'd be looking for a bounce at 10.5, but ultimately things very likely do come back down below 10,000 overall and head towards the 98 to 9900-ish region. So for right now, if I had to kind of wrap up my thoughts, probably does bounce around, or probably trades a little bit sideways here, and then gives a legitimate try above 11.5. If it can confirm above 11.5, which I think it probably does. Again, opinion not necessary, man. Opinion not fucking necessary. Then I'd be looking for extension to 11.8, 11.9 region, or sorry, 11.7, 11.8 region, and then we'll come back and see that one in real time. But for right now, I think it's time for me to wish you the best, and the happiest. Take care, and until next time.